of Life, a show about Jewish books, music, film, and web. I'm Heidi Estrin. The Book of Life is a podcast service of the Feldman Library at Congregation B'nai Israel in Boca Raton, Florida. Additional support comes from the Association of Jewish Libraries. Scribblers on the Roof is an online forum for Jewish fiction and poetry. You can find it at jscribes.com. I called the site's creator, Kelly Hartog, to get a virtual tour. Kelly, describe Scribblers on the Roof for us.
Well, I basically came up with the idea because I'd had a bunch of short stories that I had personally written, and some of them were so specifically Jewish. They had like specific Hebrew terms that I really couldn't get published anywhere else without sort of having a glossary and explaining what they were. And so I started looking for places where I could publish those stories. And I realized that while there are certain magazines and online things that you could do that, there was nothing that was really specifically devoted to fiction and poetry with specifically Jewish themes. And so that's really where the idea came from.
I get the sense that it's a very participatory kind of website. Can you talk about that?
I never wanted it to be insular. It was really about creating a community, place where people could share their ideas, but also know, oh, look, here are other people either writing or publishing or discussing things that I'm interested in.
Okay, very cool. Tell us about some of the different features of the website.
So we have separate fiction and poetry sections, and that's also broken down into what we call established writers and emerging writers. And then I have a section on debut authors, so people who have published their first novel or their first poetry book, actually out in the real world. Then separate to that, we have interviews on the site, so we interview writers a lot about either their process of what their writing process is, how their Jewish background, or if they're not Jewish, how their Jewish themes influence their work. Then I have a section listing what are the festivals and book readings on, not just around the country, but around the world. I think I really wanted to mention that it's not national, it's international, and also a section on what kind of contests and competitions are out there that people could submit to. And then the other main thing is we have guest blogs from our writers, and then we have a lot of links to websites of specific authors, literary blogs, courses you can take, Jewish publishers or library associations. And as you know, we've put up your Book of Life podcast on our site as well. So there's really kind of a whole hodgepodge of things on the site.
It's very thorough. I really appreciate being included on your website, so thank you so much for including the Book of Life.
That's my pleasure.
This may be a question that you can't answer, but I'll ask it in case you do have an answer for it.
Okay.
What do you think is the very coolest thing on the entire website?
Well, I would have to say that the coolest thing is the fact that the website exists at all. I don't know if that's dodging the question. I really felt that this was something that didn't exist. I'm just thrilled that the site is here and that people can really influence what comes next. How is the site going to change? How can it grow? I had someone email me just a couple of weeks ago and say, I see you have fiction, I see you have poetry. Do you take plays? And the truth is I'd never even thought about it. And my background's actually in the theater, and I thought, wow, isn't that a fantastic thing? Like, we could now, start a whole section on the site where we can actually have playwrights on the site. So I think the possibilities are limitless, and they're totally dependent on, the community out there saying, hey, I'd really love to see this, and I'm completely open to that. Like I said, I didn't even know that there were podcasts going on, and now we've got you on our site, so I think that's fantastic.
Earlier this year on the Book of Life, we had an episode, or a series of episodes, about the Jewish literary web, where we talked about blogs and podcasts that had Jewish book themes. Mm-hmm. Scribblers on the Roof wasn't on the radar yet, so I'm glad we can sort of bring it up to date by having this interview now. I wanted to ask you what other Jewish book blogs that you would recommend.
Well, creating this site, I came across some fantastic people. Barbara Beetz, who's a children's author and works with the library, she's extraordinary, and her site is something that I think is fantastic. The idea that there's such a vibrant, strong community out there for writers of children's books to be able to instill a sense of Jewish history and Jewish heritage and culture to a young audience. I just find that fantastic. I also love Erica Dreyfuss, who runs My Machberet, which I think is extraordinary as well. The Jewish Book Council, the Association of Jewish Libraries, all the blogs that they have up there. I mean, there's just so many of them. And then, the places where you can submit stuff, and there's some fantastic writing going on. Lilith Magazine, Zeke, Poetica. There's just some extraordinary stuff out there. And these are all things that are listed on the website at Scribblers as well.
So it'll be easy for us to follow up your recommendations.
Yes.
Why do you feel it's important, if you do feel that it's important, for Jewish writers to have an online presence?
I think it's important for people to have their voices heard in any way possible. So if you don't land up on an online site, but you get published, in a literary journal, that's fine too. I think it's just, this is the way of the world. A lot of people have come to me through the site, through Facebook, through Twitter. This is a way of being able to create an international presence. But it's wonderful that I can have people submit from the UK and Australia and South Africa and from Israel. That's the way the world is going online. And if you don't get on the bandwagon, then you're sort of missing it. You can type Jewish fiction or poetry into Twitter, and that's absolutely how I came across Andrew Sanger, who was on our website, who's known in the UK as a brilliant travel journalist, but he also wrote this fantastic novel called The J Word about growing up as a Jewish man in London. Obviously, you can clearly hear I'm not American. I was born in England. I grew up in Australia. So, yeah, I call it an accent with an identity crisis. And then I lived in Israel for 11 years, and then I moved here, which I believe makes me the quintessential wandering Jew. And I'd never wanted the site to be solely a U.S. site. Without an online presence, I don't think we'd have this community at all. So I guess the web is the way to go.
Do you feel that it's important for Jewish readers to have an online presence? Or readers with an interest in Judaica, not necessarily Jewish readers?
I think it's important for readers to have an online presence because a lot of fantastic material that's out there will never even make it into a publication, not necessarily because it's not good, but because a publication can only publish X amount of times a year, and it's only got so many pages that it can devote. But, with an online presence, we can put up as much stuff as many hours there are in the day, or as much time as I can physically find, because there's definitely enough material out there. So, there's just so much more you can absorb by being a reader looking for this stuff online, as opposed to subscribing to a magazine, which, believe me, I personally do, and waiting 3 months for something to come out, and that's quite exciting in and of itself. But by the same token, I think that having that access, being able to say, oh wow, there's a new interview up, there's a new story. As a reader, yeah, absolutely. There's just so much wonderful material out there.
Tell us a little about your own life as a Jewish writer.
I know that there's a lot of people who say, oh, what does it really mean to be a Jewish writer, and why do we have to have a label or a definition? But I think if you grow up Jewish or there's a Jewish background, then by definition you're a Jewish writer. My background was originally in the theater, and I had written fiction. I had written journalism as well, because I'm also a journalist, and I lived in Israel for 11 years and worked at the Jerusalem Post, and so all my writing tended to be Jewish. But when I started going back into my fiction, I found that this kind of naturally, on one hand, was kind of writing almost subconsciously about things that had Jewish themes, and then the other thing was really a fantastic opportunity to work with Rick Chess, who's the head of creative writing and the Jewish Studies department at UNC in Asheville. He really has this ability to get you to tap into Jewish experiences and use that to create, to really just allow yourself to connect to those parts of your Jewish life and use them as an entryway into your writing. And I do openly attribute much of the establishment of Scribblers, if not consciously, but subconsciously, to the work I did with him.
Kelly Hartog, thanks so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
There are so many ways to connect with the Book of Life. Fan us at facebook.com/Book of Life Podcast. Follow us at twitter.com/bookoflifepod. Email us at bookoflifepodcast@gmail.com or leave us a voicemail at 561-206-2473. You can also listen to the latest episode by phone at 916-313-3820. And of course, find links to everything at bookoflifepodcast.com. The Book of Life is a podcast service of the Feldman Library at Congregation B'nai Israel in Boca Raton, Florida at cbiboca.org and is supported in part by the Association of Jewish Libraries at jewishlibraries.org. Our background music is provided by the Freilach Makers Klezmer String Band at freilachmakers.com. Thanks for listening, and happy reading.